Intelligent design is a modest position theologically and philosophically. It attributes the complexity and diversity of life to intelligence, but does not identify that intelligence with the God of any religious faith or philosophical system. Nature is a book, a letter, a fairy tale, in the philosophical sense, or whatever you want to call it. First would be the literary side, then the spiritual and philosophical. The political side is required principally because of the necessity of the current Russian position. I know we should aspire to be higher philosophical beings, contemplating the universe and becoming more refined humans, but if all we did was think, then arguably we'd never have invented the wheel. It is difficult to obtain the friendship of a cat. It is a philosophical animal, one that does not place its affections thoughtlessly. Anyhow, a philosophical turn of thought now was not amiss, else one's patience would have given out almost at the harbor entrance. The term of her probation was 8 days. A philosophical problem has the form, I don't know my way about. My high school did not offer courses in philosophy, so the books that initially stimulated philosophical reflection in me were novels by Charles Dickens, Henry James, and Fyodor Dostoevsky. These days, I'm a hypocritical, philosophical vegetarian. Vegetarianism would be the right choice, but I really love meat. Religion is more than life. Remember that his own religion is the truest to every man even if it stands low in the scales of philosophical comparison. I would say I had zero philosophical thoughts at that time. I was operating on a timed checklist that we've been trained to do, to try to maximize every really minute on the moon. If female were working in the same proportion as men do, the level of GDP would be up 27% in a country like India, but also up 9% in Japan and up 5% in the United States of America. It's not just a moral issue, not just a philosophical issue, it just makes economic sense. Testimony should be a philosophical problem and not limited to legal or historical contexts where it refers to the account of a witness who reports what he has seen. My interest in biology was pretty much always on the philosophical side. The poetry of this one is called philosophical, of that one philological, of a third rhetorical, and so on. Which is then the poetic poetry? People just want to dig, they want to dance. They don't want to work all through the night, and neither do I. I like getting out there, but communication should be occurring on more levels than heavy-laden philosophical. I don't think there's an interesting boundary between philosophy and science. Science is totally beholden to philosophy. There are philosophical assumptions in science and there's no way to get around that. I'm interested in philosophical psychology, people like Nietzsche, Freud, Alkin, Foucault, Derrida. Religion and philosophy are to be preserved distinct. We are not to introduce divine revelations into philosophy, nor philosophical opinions into religion. My objection to liberalism is this: that it is the introduction into the practical business of life of the highest kind, namely, politics of philosophical ideas instead of political principles. Semiotics is a general theory of all existing languages, all forms of communication, visual, tactile, and so on. There is general semiotics, which is a philosophical approach to this field, and then there are many specific semiotics. Teenagers watch and listen to all kinds of things. It is the nature of being a teenager to seek out intense stuff about death and sex and love and fear. Teenagers are the bravest, most curious, most philosophical, most open-minded readers there are, which is why so many less than young adults like writing for them. I can get very philosophical and ask the questions Keats was asking as a young guy. What are we here for? What's a soul? What's it all about? What is thinking about? Imagination. To be a philosophical skeptic is, in a man of letters, the first and most essential to being a sound, believing Christian. I know no subject more elevating, more amazing, more ready to the poetical enthusiasm, the philosophical reflection, and the moral sentiment than the works of nature. Where can we meet such variety, such beauty, such magnificence? The safest general characterization of the European philosophical tradition is that it consists of a series of footnotes to Plato. Linguistic philosophers continue to argue that probably music is not a language, that is in the philosophical debate. Another point of view is to say that music is a very profound language. Poetry is finer and more philosophical than history, for poetry expresses the universal, and history only the particular. When I was very young I was sort of floored by the fact that my mother and my father and everyone I knew was going to die one day, and myself too. I had a sort of a philosophical crisis. I couldn't believe that we were mortal. Swing voters are more appropriately known as the idiot voters because they have no set of philosophical principles. By the age of 14, you're either a conservative or a liberal if you have an IQ above a toaster. I consider early childhood events as most essential to a man's scientific and philosophical development. Every philosophical problem, when it is subjected to the necessary analysis and justification, is found either to be not really philosophical at all, or else to be, in the sense in which we are using the word, logical. The Soft Pack self-titled full-length debut is straighter than black coffee, and twice as bitter. Frontman Matt Lampkin isn't afraid to fly his philosophical flag and face hard realities. Surrogate motherhood has been the subject of much philosophical and political dispute over the years. Antisemitism has no historical, political and certainly no philosophical origins. Antisemitism is a disease. In the discovery of secret things and in the investigation of hidden causes, stronger reasons are obtained from sure experiments and demonstrated arguments than from probable conjectures and the opinions of philosophical speculators of the common sort. A serious and good philosophical work could be written consisting entirely of jokes. No policy that does not rest upon some philosophical public opinion can be permanently maintained. I was looking at YouTube and seeing things really heat up again in terms of the popularity of talking about serious political or philosophical issues and almost no one doing leftist content that engaged with the other side in any way. I was like, I bet I can do this, so I gave it a shot, and it's worked out better than I expected. The blues are important primarily because they contain the cultural expression and the cultural response to blacks in America and to the situation that they find themselves in. And contained in the blues is a philosophical system at work. And as part of the oral tradition, this is a way of passing along information. There are men so philosophical that they can see humor in their own toothaches. But there has never lived a man so philosophical that he could see the toothache in his own humor. I've taken a philosophical position on email. Although I think it's a wonderful communication technology, and it has a lot of good uses, it is abused quite a lot. Medical ethics is a fascinating discipline, as it deals with issues replete with complex philosophical, moral, and ethical considerations that are rarely black or white. I have a real kind of fundamental philosophical belief that movies are better if everyone gets paid when they work, and if they don't work, the people who worked on them make a little bit of money. And the people who finance them, they lose, but they don't lose too much. I believe that creates better work. My mum's always been a grateful person, a considerate, philosophical kind of person who just tries to do the best. The universe, in a Big Bang mode, is still expanding, which means it's cooling down, and evolution seems to be going against this. We're almost battling it. That led me on to a more creative, philosophical way of thinking, which is what led into influencing some of the songs, which is, maybe this is what our struggle is. No argument for abortion survives scientific, philosophical, or theological scrutiny. I love my country very dearly, and I greatly resent the implication that some of the places that I have sung and some of the people that I have known, and some of my opinions, whether they are religious or philosophical, make me less of an American. It seemed to me that the real philosophical breakthroughs of the 20th century were in terms of the understanding of language. What is language? Where does it come from? How does it work? What does it do? I have never entered into any controversy in defense of my philosophical opinions. I leave them to take their chance in the world. If they are right, truth and experience will support them. If wrong, they ought to be refuted and rejected. Disputes are apt to sour one's temper and disturb one's quiet. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.